All right, so today we will discuss the method portion of your paper. So let me go ahead and play from this slide. All right, so you've already written your intro and I'll be getting feedback to you shortly. But why should you write an introduction, or sorry, in method section? So one, we want you to write a method section so that other researchers can evaluate your work. And if wanted, they can also replicate your work. So you should include enough information so that another researcher could run the same exact study if they wanted to. And why would we want to do this? Replication is important to science. It lets us know whether the science you conducted is appropriate, whether the findings you discovered were only due to that setting or that particular sample, or whether it can be replicated in other situations. So a method section really allows people, researchers, and you to know who was recruited, and this affects the generalizability of the results, how the variables were operationalized, so how people operationalize concepts like happiness or sadness, and what the outcome measures were. So what were the dependent variables and how were they measured? So when writing or evaluating a method section, you can look at and assess the strength of your study, identify potential confounds, and extend existing research. So one component of your method section should be, sorry, we skipped over. Formatting. So what about formatting your method section? So in this class, you're not actually running the study and you're using past tense. So at this point in your writing, you would have already completed the research project if you're actually collecting the data. So write in the past tense. I also want you to make sure that you center the word method. So I don't want you to use the word methods, plural, just method, singular. And this is in fact not true. So let me, method section is bolded. So I will go ahead and correct that. So the APA formatting style has changed, and it used to be that you didn't have to bold it, but the method section, the main section, is bolded now. And the subheadings are flush left and bolded. So your subheadings should be things like participants, materials, procedure, design, and analyses. So let's talk about these subheadings. In your participant section, I want to know how many participants did you recruit? The rule of thumb is about 50 participants per cell, but that's changing. And because you will hypothetically be recruiting for Moo, it will be pretty difficult to get approximately 50 participants per cell. So for this project, let's say my research question is investigating how music affects athletic performance, and I have my participants listen to either techno music or classical music. So in this study, I have one independent variable, music, and it has two levels, techno or classical music. I have one dependent variable, and this is athletic performance. So we base the sample size off of the levels of the independent variable. So given that there are two levels or two cells, and I said earlier that you would need 50 participants per cell, in this study, you would need 100 participants. But let's say that I'm not only interested in investigating how music affects athletic performance, but I'm also interested in how gender affects athletic performance. So in this study, I'm categorizing gender as either male or female, although I know it exists on a continuum. So in this study, I have two independent variables with two levels each. So music has two levels, techno or classical music, and gender has two levels, male or female. I still have one dependent variable, that is athletic performance, and we base our sample size off of the number of and levels of the independent variable, as stated earlier. So in this study, I wouldn't need 100 participants. I would need 200 participants. So this, just so you can see, so this is one level, male and female, and then this is another level, techno music or classical music. For the males, I would have 50 males in the techno music condition, 50 males in the classical music condition. Then I'd have 50 females in the techno music condition and 50 females in the classical music condition. So what about beyond participants? What about the screening criteria? So did you only want people that loved music in your study, or did you only want racial or ethnic minorities? Was there any screening criteria? For some of your studies, there might not be any screening criteria. Even if you didn't have any screening criteria, researchers would still be interested in knowing whether all of the participants in your study were WU students. You also want to describe your sample. So describe the age, gender, race, ethnicity of your sample. And this, if you would have conducted a study, would be data that you would have collected. You might also want to include other information if it's relevant to your findings. So for instance, income levels might be relevant if you're studying the effects of helping behavior on monetary donations, but income levels might be irrelevant if you're studying coffee consumption, right? It might not be as important. Then you might also want to describe the number. So for instance, in some of the studies that I've conducted, I've had 300 participants in my study that signed up for the study, but only 250 participants actually completed all measures. So I would say something like 300 participants signed up for the study, but only 250 participants completed all measures. Thus, the analyses will be conducted with only the 250 participants that completed each survey. You also want some demographic information, so the percent of male versus female in your study, the age range, the average age, and the standard deviation. You also want to talk about where and how your participants were recruited, and whether your participants were compensated with course credit or monetary incentives. Also, in your material section, this is a subsection within your method section, all materials used should be mentioned. So for instance, the Beck depression inventory should be mentioned if you're using depression as a dependent variable, and you should cite it appropriately. So which measures did you decide on? Why did you decide on this measure? Does it have good reliability? Does it have good validity? Does it have good reliability, which we just mentioned? Another thing to note is that I want you to use measures that have already been created. I don't want you to create your own measures of depression or happiness or romantic relationship satisfaction, because there are already measures that have been created to assess those variables. So all of you will likely be using surveys. So when surveys are used, please describe the survey. So I want you to give me a short description of the measure and what it measures. So the Beck Depression Inventory measures levels of depression. It includes 10 items, and people respond to these items on a scale from 1, strongly disagree, to 7, strongly agree. A sample item includes measures like, etc., whatever the measure is. And then you say something like, if you score high on the Beck Depression Inventory, that means that you are high on depression. Now, this might seem obvious to you, but to a new reader, a researcher, they might not know this information, and it might be important that they glean this from what you write. All right, let's continue with materials. Talked about including sample questions. I do want you to include all the items from the original measure in the appendix. And when using a pre-existing published measure, include the full name of the measure followed by abbreviation and citation of the original author. So for instance, the suspicion of motives index, Major et al. And after that, you can call it the SOMI. So again, this has changed. So I will change this PowerPoint to reflect the changes in our APA formatting. So more than 2 authors use that et al. So Major et al. 2013, call it the SOMI. Procedure. So this is a step-by-step of how you collected the data. It's sort of like a recipe. So first you mix the water, flour, and yeast, add salt, let the bread rise overnight, and so on and so forth. I want you to make sure to include enough detail so another researcher could replicate your study if they wanted to. Where were your surveys completed? Were they completed online, in person, in the classroom? Was there another research assistant present? So include as much detail as would be necessary to replicate your study. You should also write the procedure in the order that the events occurred. So start with informed consent, discuss your design. So what were the conditions in your study? How were people assigned to condition? Whether you counterbalanced or not? When did the experiment take place? Was it during normal business hours? Was it on the weekend? Was it during finals week? Because all of that information could potentially influence your results. We also want to know what the instructions you gave to participants were. So did participants know the true purpose of the study when they walked into the study, or were they slightly deceived? And then I do want you to talk about how you debriefed your participants. All right, so your method section should be relatively short. It should be between 1 and 2 pages long. And I've included a sample paper link, and I will also include this in your in our course canvas. So for instance, let me see if I can pull this website over here. It will not let me. So let me just see if I can pull this whole thing. Whoa, weird. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Undo. Why is it making me do this? Okay, I want the mouse. Here we go. Perfect. All right, so I was looking at car seat stuff for my baby, but that's neither here nor there. So this is what a method section should look like. So method, your participants in the study concluded this many students. What were the materials of the study? What was the design and the procedure? And that's it. So for them, it looks like it was a page and a half long. So that's it for the method section. I'm going to upload the new PowerPoint shortly, upload the new video. And if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck writing your paper.